Welcome everyone to week 6 of MUDs. Yeah. I see you, Yana. Welcome to week 6 of MUDs. This week we are forming Easter's teams. So everyone will debate in fairly random teams after the training. And Tim is passing out the forms now that basically everyone should fill out, which will specify the preferences for debating tonight and debating or adjudicating at Easter's. Easter's, to refresh your memory, is a novice intervarsity tournament that this year is being held at the University of Adelaide during the Easter break. MUDs will be arranging transport, and the tournament provides accommodation and meals and things like that. So we leave on the 26th of April and arrive back in the evening of the 30th of April. So you still get somewhat of an Easter break as well. The total cost will depend on how many teams we end up sending, but the maximum cost will be $480. So we'll confirm that after tonight when we know how many people are interested. That cost won't go up, but it might go down. Who knows? It's a mystery. If you have any questions about Easter's, come and find me or a committee member after the training. Once you fill out your form, just pass it back to the end of the row and we'll tie them up while the training happens. Tonight we are lucky to have with us Tim Sonreich, a former or reigning, so to speak, Australasian champion and variously accomplished person who is quite intelligent and will be sharing with you tonight the secrets of case construction. Please welcome Tim Sonreich.
So thanks for coming out tonight, folks, although you're probably mostly here to sign up for Easter's rather than listen to me, but I'll try to make this as painless as possible. The catch with this is, usually when you get someone in to do these sort of sessions, you get to talk about some fascinating and controversial issue, whether that's, environment or economics or feminism or something. The problem with case construction is it's pretty dull. So I'm going to do my best, but you're going to have to work with me, which is, this is a pretty abstract concept. I'm going to tell you about how to structure your ideas, but not what those ideas are. That's your problem and the problem for other sessions. It's very abstract, it's a bit dry. The problem is though, if you don't get it right, you'll kind of lose pretty much every debate, especially if you're against a team that even half gets it right. So it's tough, you've got fair warning, please stay with me. Here we go. So the aim of tonight's session is to cover basic case construction. We're going to do two key things. The first one is we're going to talk about definitions, and the point of that is to make sure that you are doing the right debate. If you get your definition wrong and you're in fact arguing about the wrong issues and the wrong topic, then it doesn't really matter in many cases how good your arguments are. You're going to be in big trouble. And the second thing we're going to do is we're going to talk about what's called first principles case construction. And the basic version of first principles is how to make sure you're doing the debate right. So once you've found the right debate, you know what the issue is, how do you then make sure that you structure the clash in that debate so that it's a proper and fair and reasonable and effective debate which you can then go on to try to win. But if you don't get those first 2 points of set up right, if you're not talking about the right things, and you're not talking about them in broadly the right ways, then you're pretty stuffed. So let's have a look at definitions. Now, there's two types of rules that define what a definition is at the major tournaments that the vast majority of you will do. And that's any tournament that's in British parliamentary style, which I don't have to worry about right now, but for the sake of completeness, I'm including that right now, which is Worlds, and basically every competition you'll do in the second half of this year. But for the sake of this conversation, we want to talk about Easters and Australs and tournaments that are in the 3-on-3 style, and most of the variations of 3-on-3. They have slightly different rules about what the definition of the debate is. Just to be clear, for those who might be very new to debating, the definition is the thing you do right at the start. In your first speaker's first minute, what they should be doing with that time is defining the debate. And that means explaining what is the problem that this debate will be focused on trying to deal with. So the topic might be as broad as you like. It might be that the grass is always greener on the other side, which you don't do topics like that at Easter, but for the sake of argument, let's say you did. It doesn't matter. That topic's about a problem. It's not about a philosophical clash of ideas about whether or not we look back with rose-coloured glasses or whether or not other people always have it better than us. It's about a problem. You have to identify clearly what that problem is. It might be a big problem or a small problem, but it needs to be a specific problem. If the topic is that we believe that economic deregulation has gone too far. That's not a broad, sweeping topic about whether or not economic rationalism is the way to go. It's about a specific problem. Okay? Can I say this any more clearly? I don't think I can. So in your definition, you define, you explain, you identify what is that problem that debate will be focused around. You say it about as clearly and specifically as you can. But in order to define the topic correctly and to make sure you're defining it within the rules, there aren't a huge number of rules, but what rules do exist are very important. The first two up there are really basic ones we're just going to slam through because there shouldn't be any problem. The first one is no time setting. All debates occur in the present or in the immediate term. So don't get tricky. No debates occur in the past. This isn't a debate about whether George Washington should have adopted economic rationalism. Not a case about whether or not nuclear power is acceptable in the distant Star Trek-like universe future where everything works better and if anything goes wrong we can just teleport it into space. All debates occur in the present time or in the immediate term. So for example, you can define a debate about, say, that the West should intervene in the Ivory Coast, which if you haven't been paying attention is a country in West Africa where people are chopping each other to pieces quite literally. You may well get a debate on whether Western nations should, in a Libya-type fashion, intervene in that problem, and you can, if you want, say, we would intervene as the affirmative team, because the topic says we have to, but we would first issue warnings and give the authorities in the Ivory Coast 1 week to comply with those warnings. If they don't, we'd attack and blow them back to the Stone Age. That's fine. That's still an okay time setting because you're not kind of putting the debate in a context that's unfair. You're not firing it into the future where people can't be sure about what the terms of the debate will be. You're not seeing it in the past, which is pretty ridiculous and pointless. The type of debating we do in university in Australia is called parliamentary style debating, which means the idea is you're supposed to pretend you're in a parliament. You are the elected representatives. You are making decisions about today. It's not a philosophy club. It's not a rhetoric club. It's not a public speaking competition. You're elected officials making decisions using real people's money, real people's resources, and trying to change real people's lives. So we debate in the present. The second rule is about no unfair place setting. Now, many debates, in fact, need to be place set, so that's not a problem. The problem is fairly place setting them, which means there's a big difference between taking a broad topic and narrowing it down to say, so the topic is that economic rationalism has gone too far, and you say, we mean this in the context of the United States, where they've just suffered obviously a pretty massive financial crash. We think that their financial systems are stuffed because they deregulated far too much, and our model for fixing that is A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And that's what we're going to debate about today. That's fine. But if you said, well, what we think the problem has been is that in the Nagorno-Karabakh region of Azerbaijan, which for the record is disputed by Armenia, that region has gone far too far in deregulating its financial instruments, and we would reimpose a rule by their third Prime Minister of the 1970s who had a model of economic management which was this. Now, the reason why that's unfair is not because any of the things I said are untrue, although probably they are, because Nagorno-Karabakh's a place full of sheep more than people who economically regulate anything. But the point is, we have to decide not whether or not your opponents do know anything about that topic, but whether they should. Is it fair and reasonable to believe that your opponents should know enough about that issue and that, or that country or that region? It doesn't have to be a specific country. It might be, might be Europe, might be Southeast Asia. If you think they should, if you think it's reasonable because this has been an issue, it's been in the media, it's been controversial, people have been talking about it. If they haven't been paying attention, that's their fault. Then that's fine. Knock yourself out. But if you're just showing off because for whatever reason you happen to care about Nagorno-Karabakh more than the average person, which wouldn't be hard, then that's not a fair definition. So if the topic was that we believe that minority groups deserve their own state, now you could set that debate in Israel, for example, and say we think that means Palestinian people deserve their own state. Now even if your opponents freak out, scream, run out of the room and say, I don't know anything about Israel, I'm terrified of this debate, that's cool. Because if debaters at university level don't at least have a functional understanding of what's happening in Israel, then they're not trying hard enough, right? It couldn't be more high profile if you tried. Okay? So if you don't know about that, that's your problem as the opposition. But if you send it to some obscure location that no one's ever heard of, then that's a different story. So it's not that hard to place that correctly. It only becomes a bigger issue when you're at international tournaments where the context changes a bit. For the sake of Easters, it's pretty easy. You can define debates about Australia or about the West or about Europe or about Asia. Just be careful when you think, I've got this really smart, clever way I'm going to define the debate. Don't be too clever because it'll backfire on you. Now, those are the easy things. The hard things are how do you actually pick what the issue is going to be for the debate? How do you decide between the thousands of options that a topic might present to you about which country and exactly what type of thing you're going to do in that country or that place. Well, it doesn't really matter what debating tournament you're at. I think the same 2 rules apply. These 2 rules are overly strict if you're in BP style, but I think it's good practice to use them all the time. It means that you'll minimise the likelihood that your opponents will complain about the definition, which is the worst possible thing that can happen. Right? Let me just be clear. The worst thing that can happen to you is to have a debate about the definition. A, you won't enjoy it. B, your speaker scores will be unbelievably low, no matter how amazingly brilliant you think you are and why your definition is. The world's best speakers cannot get good scores in a definitional debate because it's not a debate about anything, it's a debate about what the debate should have been about. So you're stuffed, and your judge will hate you, and the word will get out that you're bad people, and no one will want to sleep with you. So stay away from definitional debate. So this is the way you do it. There are 2 tests that are easy to apply. The first one is context. When you see the wording of the topic, whatever it is, it doesn't matter because it's a generic test. Ask yourself, is there something that I'm aware of that's happening in the world, in this country, in a particular region, in a state, in a place that relates to this topic? When I see the words, does anything spring to mind from my perhaps limited reading of the media and public events? If, for example, there's a topic that says we should abandon nuclear power, something should jump to mind about that, right? There should be a context where you say, I think I know why they've set this topic. It's not just because they've randomly sorted through topics for the last 25 years and pulled out nuclear power. It's probably because there's a massive issue in Japan right now with nuclear power. So probably that's the context of the debate. If you can identify that context, you're halfway there to making sure you pick the right definition. The second test is a bit harder, and you need more experience for this one, and that's the spirit of the motion. Now, this implies 2 things. Firstly, that you've had enough experience to know what the spirit of the motion means. That just takes time, but the earlier you start trying to do it, the better. Secondly, it assumes that the people who set the topic have half a brain. Unfortunately, that's not always true. But for the sake of this discussion, we're going to assume that they did. The spirit of the motion means, what was this debate supposed to be about? Okay, usually it's very senior, experienced judges and debaters who set topics, particularly for important tournaments like Easter's. They don't just randomly pluck issues out of their minds. They sit down and they think about, how will this debate work? Will there be enough good arguments on both sides? Is there enough flexibility for the teams to be a bit creative and come up with their own arguments, their own opportunities? Is this debate complex and interesting enough to be worthwhile giving to people who have paid a lot of money and time to come to this tournament? And if they've thought through all of those issues, then the topic should be a very good one. If you can try to even unpick 10% of what that logic was that they were thinking of, what's this key debate about, what's the topic trying to make me discuss, you'll be much better off. So to take the extreme example from before about if the topic was the grass is always greener on the other side, and once upon a time, back when I was young, when I was a boy, you did actually get topics like that, right? So they're useful examples because every now and then some idiot thinks they're a good idea. They're, like most things, are extinct for a reason. But anyway, when you get the topic that the grass is always greener on the other side, it's not some broad debate about philosophy, okay? It's not a chance for you to kind of wax lyrical about whatever bad poetry you write in your spare time, okay? It's a debate about something. What were they thinking? It's a metaphor. It's about something. It's trying to get you to understand that there's a clash, there's a trade-off, there's some tension inherent in that idea, and that's what they want you to talk about, not the exact words in the topic, right? That's why you don't need dictionaries to define debate. You just need a brain. And the brain is, what is it about? What is the idea? What is the problem? What is the situation that requires smart people to unravel? You can figure that out, you're doing pretty well. Last thing, I'll only touch on this very briefly because it doesn't matter to you right now, but culture matters, okay? So when you go to international tournaments in particular, so some of you go to Australasians against in the middle of this year, which I highly recommend, or if you go to Worlds in the year, when you're thinking about context and spirit of the motion, you have to remember that your context and your understanding of the debate is not necessarily objectively right. Okay? Western media is a type of media, not the media. So just because our newspapers think something's important or doesn't think something's important doesn't mean that on its own is objective enough of a test. Okay? You have to ask yourself, what will our opponents be thinking about this too? Okay. Now the really hard stuff, basic first principles. Now this is what I warned you about. This stuff is dry and hard and a bit complicated. You've got to think abstractly. I'm sorry, I know you don't want to do that after a long day of being university students, but stay with me. Okay, basic first principles is about trying to come up with ways to understand what the kind of macro form of the debate is. Okay, I'm not talking about individual arguments. I don't care what your individual arguments are because I don't know what the topic is. But what I can tell you is that in a very large number of debates have the same shape. right? They're the same type of debate. So for